I'm Biresh Banerjee and welcome to Ask DW, a program broadcasting simultaneously on YouTube from where we take your questions and put them to our experts whom you'll hear from in just a moment. Today, we're looking at India, where the results of a 6-week-long election are being compiled. Some 640 million votes are currently being counted to determine who will lead India for the next 5 years. And based on the initial projections, incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi may just win another term, but facing a significant challenge from the opposition. This is what the numbers are looking like at the moment. His BJP-led NDA coalition is currently leading in some 295 seats, and the opposition Congress Party-led India Alliance is on track to win around 230 seats. It's a lot closer than expected, this contest. So we'll be discussing why this is happening with our experts and also looking at what these trends and results mean for India moving forward. And we'd like for you to send us your questions on this subject. But first, let's just head to Delhi, where DW correspondent Shalu Yadav is standing by at the BJP headquarters in Delhi. Shalu, what a day it's turning out to be. Not the supermajority that the BJP had hoped for. Are you getting a sense over there as to what went wrong?
Well, if you can just see behind me, the celebrations have just started to pick up, but it's not quite the match to the numbers that the BJP had expected. I mean, it's nowhere near Prime Minister Modi's call for the claim for 400 seats, more than 400 seats out of the 543. We just spoke to a senior party member inside at the headquarters, and he said that this should not be seen as a setback. In fact, it's a victory that even after 10 years, the people of this country chose him to be the Prime Minister. Well, it's too soon to say that as well, Biresh. But they do say that there's going to be introspection within the party as to why the numbers are lower than what they had expected. But what I can tell you from our reporting over the last 2 months is that the factors that really stood out were unemployment amongst the youth, as well as inflation and rural distress as well. Remember, farmers is a huge voting bloc in India, and they have also been very disappointed with this government. And experts also say that Prime Minister's divisive language during the election campaigning may have gone against him.
I'd like to get a sense from you, because I know that you were traveling all across the country, getting a sense of the mood over the last 6 weeks. What stood out to you? What were you hearing from the people, from voters who were voting in all these different 6 phases?
Well, what really stood out for me is that, despite the disillusionment amongst the voters, Prime Minister Modi continues to remain very, very popular amongst the voters. That may not have translated, with a resounding majority in the numbers that we are seeing so far. But we can comfortably say that he's one of the most popular prime ministers that India has seen in its history. But that said, there is a lot of disillusionment as well with Prime Minister Modi. So, for instance, I'll just give you an example. When we were speaking to the unemployed, the youth who have been unemployed and looking for jobs and not getting anywhere in the last few years, still told me that they would vote for the BJP because they don't see a stronger alternative. They see the India Alliance, the opposition alliance, as fractured and not offering the kind of authoritativeness that they like to see in someone like a Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Shalu, we'll leave it there for the moment. You're doing fantastic being able to speak over the din behind you, and I'm expecting that din is only going to get louder as the hours progress. But thanks so much for joining us from the BJP headquarters in Delhi, and thanks for your reporting. So we're hoping that you'll be sending us your questions. And as you do, as you think about the comments that you'd like to send us in the chat, on our YouTube page, it's time to introduce our experts to you. With me in the studio is DW's Nimisha Jaiswal. Nimisha was covering the elections last time in 2019. And maybe we can compare between 2019 and 2024,
Absolutely.
What lessons we can draw. In some time, we should be joined by by political analyst Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay from Delhi. We're just working on the line currently. But let's just start with some of the questions that are already coming in, and this is to do with the immediate significance of the results that we are seeing at the moment. Again, these are just initial results, not the final results. And maybe we can throw that question up on the prompter. On the screen. This is a question that is asking about what will be the significant effect of the current government, especially Prime Minister Modi, with this election result. So, any initial comments, Nimisha?
Well, focusing on Prime Minister Modi and his reaction to this, I do expect him to come out and thank the people for a third term, that the mandate does support him. I don't think he would, in an opening statement, for example, acknowledge the loss in seats. That is not a tendency that we have seen with the BJP and its leadership to say, we noticed that we have lost 60 seats, we will try to regain your confidence. But when it comes to or to acknowledge the gains that the opposition has seen. The Prime Minister and the BJP have been very hard on the opposition. They have been very vocal and at times quite virulent about how they address the opposition. But in terms of policy and action, that would be interesting because I think it can go one of two ways. One is that they focus on the economic benefits, the development agenda that the BJP seems to be supporting, to see this election result as feedback of the divisive narrative or the Hindu-focused narrative may not be working. But the other possibility, of course, is that when the BJP doubles down on its policies, becomes more aggressive and appeals to its voters that believe in the broader Hindutva plus development agenda, and then that would mean that they are pushing for those votes even more. And we do know there are state elections coming up.
Right.
So this contest almost continues even for the 5 years between general elections.
Right, Nimisha, hold that thought because let's bring in Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, whom we had promised would be joining us from Delhi. Nilanjan, good to see you. Just, on the point of Hindu nationalism, because we have always referred to the BJP as a Hindu nationalist party, and with good reason, because of the Hindu nationalist policies and the pitch that has always come from the BJP. Do you think, based on the results that we are seeing right now, that Hindu nationalism itself has a bit of a sell-by date and it can only work to a point and then not more?
Well, the results show, given the kind of losses which has happened, these are actually mainly because of the fact that the Hindu nationalistic campaign of the BJP has not worked. The biggest losses of the BJP are in the state of Uttar Pradesh, which is also the most populous state and which also elects the largest number of parliamentarians, who send them to the Lok Sabha, which is the lower house of Indian Parliament. So 80 seats are sent from that particular state. Now, the Ram temple was actually constructed in that particular state, and if the BJP's performance is so poor in that particular state, it is obviously a testimony to the fact that a Hindu nationalistic and the Ram temple, which was inaugurated with great fanfare by Prime Minister Modi on the 22nd of January this year, has not really worked or given electoral dividends to the BJP. Even in other states, it has really not, delivered that much as was expected. And Mr. Modi, especially from the second half of the campaign, he essentially prioritized focusing on a communally polarizing campaign. In his speeches, he kept on using all kinds of Islamophobic language, and arguments were also given which tried to divide people on the basis of their religious identity and
Right.
to raise the passions of the Hindu voter, which Mr. Modi thought would be the core supporters of the BJP. But it has not actually turned out that way, even though the party has broken fresh ground in some parts of eastern India. The state of Odisha, for instance, the BJP has actually come to power and will be forming a local state government there. Even down south in Kerala, it's quite likely that the BJP will end up winning one seat and what is proverbially called in India that open its account in Kerala, which is going to be quite commendable. So the BJP will definitely, we can no longer affix the tag of it being a Hindi heartland state, which speaks the language of the northern Indians, that is language of Hindi.
I do want to talk about
yeah.
I do want to talk about the North-South divide, but just if you can just stay on the topic of Hindu nationalism, which in a way is a sort of right-wing politics, and this is where I'd like to just sort of bring in a question that has been asked in the chat on YouTube, and we'll throw this up on the screens now. It's being asked by Gurpreet Paul, and he's asking, this is for you, Nilanjan, how does the Indian electorate compare to the trend of rising extreme right-wing politics in the USA and Europe? How would you assess that, Nilanjan?
There has been actually no empirical study to suggest, as to how the Indian voter has reacted to what is happening in Europe or in USA. By and large, I would say, that Indians were fairly warm to the idea of both Mr. Obama, Barack Obama, when he was the president of India and visited India in the early years of Ms. Modi's tenure, and then again when the Republican president Donald Trump visited India in the early months of 2020, just as the pandemic was beginning to show its presence fell in Delhi. So there is very little to choose. But there is something which we hear all the time about the Indian diaspora, especially those who are living in the United States. There's this very peculiar kind of a paradox that while in the US they might be the supporters of the Democrats and not really go with a Trump-led Republican Party. But while being there, that being their political stance, they'll still continue to be Modi supporters. This has been a paradox which has always been seen. And, it's very difficult to actually provide a very rational argument to that. Only I can say that those people are essentially being driven by this appeal for a strong authoritarian leader.
Okay, let's expand on this a bit more and expand it out to the West. And this is a question that has come looking at the Western reaction potentially to the results that we are seeing. And we'll try and throw this up on the screen now. And the question that has basically come is this: will the West put more pressure on India because of the result? That question from Harshit Tiwari. And maybe I'll just throw that to you, Nimisha. Any initial guesses as to will the West be putting more pressure on India now? I don't know, will they see India slightly more vulnerable because it is not such a huge majority that was expected?
The question also comes back to what does pressure count as? But overall, when it comes to India's international policies, I think Mr. Modi getting a third term means that much of that narrative is expected to continue. Much of those relations are expected to continue. India's strength on the international stage also has to do with its massive base of consumers, of young people who work, and those are some of the things that drive India's bilateral relations. And when it comes to Mr. Modi's supporters, they do admire his presence on the international stage. So I can't really imagine a shift in the balance of power when it comes to issues of international trade or international relations on other fronts. But the only thing that I can imagine perhaps coming up is the fact that there has been criticism in the past of Mr. Modi's leadership from certain organizations when they look at the freedom of the press, the freedom of minorities. But once again, with Mr. Modi at the helm, his government does continue to always push back pretty confidently on any criticism. I do not expect that to change.
Right. Let's just bring it back to India, the debate. And there are questions here that are coming in, especially to do with the state of Uttar Pradesh. And this is something that I'd like to sort of bring into the discussion to maybe sort of flesh out the results and why we are seeing them. And maybe therefore this question on the state of Uttar Pradesh is vitally important. We'll throw that up on the screens now. The question that is being asked is, what might the reasons be for BJP's surprisingly weak performance in the state of Uttar Pradesh? That question coming from Anurag Vatsa. And I think that's a question for you, Nilanjan. If you can just sort of explain to us, because you were talking a bit about Uttar Pradesh, why Uttar Pradesh is so significant when it comes to the Lok Sabha results all across India.
Well, Uttar Pradesh is important because it is the most important state of the country. It is the most populous state. It elects 80 parliamentarians to the Indian Parliament. And, the reason for the BJP's weak performances are several. One, of course, is this entire issue of the economic issues. Youth being unemployed, youth no longer being able to enroll into the armed forces in a big way because of a change in the manner of recruitment. The government is no longer recruiting people into the armed forces on a full-time till the end of career basis, but only for a short tenure of 4 years. So the big question arises that even if after a lot of effort, a lot of competitive exams and tests, if they are able to get selected, that employment is only for 4 years. After 4 years, what are a large number of, in millions, large number of able-bodied young men going to be do? Where will they find employment? So the entire issue of employment has been a big worry for them. Likewise, price rises have been spiraling in India. So there are several, hardcore economic concerns of the people. There are also, we cannot forget the fact that this is the first election after COVID, the first parliamentary elections after the COVID pandemic. And the performance of the Uttar Pradesh government during that period was not particularly very good. It was kind of, didn't have much effect during the state elections in 2021, but possibly that can be one of the reasons people remembered, how poor the state government as well as the center had been at that time. Plus, I also think that BJP possibly went overboard with its Hindu nationalistic campaign.
Right.
So these are the few reasons as to why I can immediately think of as more information comes in and we get firmer electoral data, we will be able to analyze more and give you some more precise reasons.
Just staying with Uttar Pradesh, it is not just the Congress, which was an opposition party in play over there. It was also the Samajwadi Party, which is a local regional party in play. And I'm wondering if there are other parties and other political leaders from regional parties that were key in this election. And therefore, this sort of brings me to the question that a viewer has asked, which is the following, which is which key political figures from opposition parties stood out over the last few weeks, helping this trend in the numbers? That question from Raymond M.A. Would you like to take that on, Nilanjan?
Yeah, sure. If you look at the trends at the moment and expect that, see that they are going to become the likely verdict, the total number of parliament seats which are held by the two largest parties, which is the BJP and the Congress party, would be something in the range of 350. Which would mean that about 200 seats, which is a fairly large number, 200 seats would be held by the smaller parties. So one of the reasons as to why the BJP has not done very well in this elections is because several state leaders who are aligned with the opposition front, who are part of the India bloc, as they say, INDIA, that's an acronym which was coined, fairly large, alphabet, but that was coined. So their performance has been particularly good, and this is particularly so after the second largest, state in terms of, those who elect the MPs from there. That is the western state of Maharashtra, where India's financial capital Mumbai is also located. Now there, the BJP and its allies have had taken a little fair amount of beating there, and the opposition alliance, which is part of the Congress, is part of that, and breakaway factions or some allies, of the original state. It's fairly complicated. Let me not get into the reps, but the Congress and its allies, they have done better, which has been the result of, two very important state leaders from there. One of them is Uddhav Thackeray, and the other is, of course, the, very veteran Sharad Pawar. They have posed a very important role. Two important state leaders would play a very important role in the BJP-led government, which when it comes to power. One of them is going to be Chandrababu Naidu from the state of Andhra Pradesh, where his party has done very well. And the other leader is going to be the Chief Minister of Bihar, that is Mr. Nitish Kumar, where also the party has done very well. And Mr. Modi would be dependent, most probably, if the present trends become the final numbers, on these two parties to cling on to the majority, which get the magic number of 272.
And what does that say, Nimisha, about with the current trends continuing and the BJP settling at around, say, the 240 mark, short of the 272 halfway mark towards majority, Nilanjan talking about Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar as regional parties, if that coalition is formed and they are able to go past the halfway mark, that doesn't represent a very stable coalition, does it?
I'm afraid it doesn't. And it's also really interesting that parties that have a very small fraction, you're talking about 15 or 16 seats out of 543, for them to play kingmakers, for them to be able to impose conditions on the BJP that has been this mammoth force for the last 10 years is quite fascinating to watch. And the fact that, and it is obviously clear that they're unlikely to directly challenge Mr. Modi because, as Shalu pointed out earlier, as Nilanjan's pointed out, he is a political force to be reckoned with. Nobody would want to be on his bad side. But all of that being said, the fact that they can threaten when it comes to policies that the parliament is passing to walk out or to not support something that the government is doing does introduce instability for sure. And also to kind of quickly circle back to the question about political figures in the opposition that stood out, I do feel like it's also a question of what did not stand out because, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who's the head of the Congress and which is the main party of the opposition, often gets a lot of heat for not being a comparable figure to Mr. Modi. But there does seem to be a bit of trust when it comes to Congress votes, and the fact that another key leader whose party has not performed that dramatically, Arvind Kejriwal, the fact that he was arrested in the run-up to the elections also, I think, invited criticism and made him a significant opposition figure as a symbol of what the BJP tries to do with power. And I think that may have hurt the BJP as well.
Let's go back to the question of stability that I had asked you, because there is a very interesting question that has come from a viewer. We're going to throw that up on the screens now, and it is to do with exactly what we're talking about. Do you think that there might be some surprises from NDA allies or India allies switching sides, resulting in an unstable government going forward? That is from Hath Katai Thakur. Well, that's a name in jest, but well, let's come to you first, Nimisha, and then we can come to you, Nilanjan. What do you think? There could be side switching from both sides, right?
We know exactly who this question refers to. There is one particular political party in the state of Bihar where the leader has had a reputation for changing sides pretty often. And it seems even on the ground, journalists found voters calling that politician by names referring to his tendency to change colors and change sides really often. And like we were just talking about, if that happens, that's going to reduce, if I'm literally going by current numbers, that's going to bring the BJP maybe 6 or 7 seats above the halfway mark. And if the other party also starts playing around a bit or putting firm demands, like we said, it no longer has a majority. So definitely a major risk. I imagine in this moment in Delhi, we were talking earlier about how the numbers are rolling in pretty slowly. Maybe there's a bit of negotiating happening. Maybe there's a bit of appealing to the coalition partners, saying, please stay with us. Please don't leave us.
I would like to be in the rooms there in the BJP headquarters, particularly to see the tension that must be there in the air, and potentially in the Congress headquarters as well.
But that's also the other question, right? Because we do know that Indian politics has a history of horse trading. There's no better way to put it. But essentially, can the Congress and its coalition appeal to BJP supporters enough to draw them over to their side? Can the opposite happen? We're going to see that play out. But honestly, Birish, the fact that the last 10 years we've seen none of it, it's kind of fun that it's happening finally. There's some conversation.
You say it is fun. I remember a time of 21 parties in coalition. Let's bring this back to Nilanjan. Nilanjan, we're entering a coalition politics, right? I mean, how stable is this going to be, or is it going to be like a new kind of coalition politics that India has not seen before?
No, India has actually gone through several of these coalitions, and it's quite often thought, that coalitions don't do very well in India and that governance suffers. But if you actually go back to coalitions in India, and also the fact of minority governments, India's first economic reforms of 1991, when the process of economic liberalization was initiated, was done by a minority government. Very important decisions were taken through the late 1990s, from 96, 97 onwards, till the, right through the BJP years, the first BJP government which was formed between 1998 and 2004. Very important key economic decisions were taken at that time. 2004 to 2014, also a fairly large and unwieldy at times coalition. But the Indian economy did fairly well, at least in the initial part of it. Subsequent to that, of course, because of the global reasons, Indian economy also stuttered at that time and was one of the reasons as to why Mr. Modi was elected in 2014. I, for one, think that Indian coalitions, governance become more participative. It does not become as dictatorial or as authoritarian as it has often been in the last 10 years. There is actually the need for consensual politics. So my biggest sense is that this verdict is actually going to see the emergence of a new Mr. Modi, somebody who knows how to take along others and other, quite often at times, inimical political forces along with him. You will see that him also feeling the need to interact more with the opposition if he does not want to jeopardize his government. It's going to be a very challenging for Mr. Modi. How he negotiates is something which has to be seen.
It's interesting you say that about Mr. Modi, because I did want to bring in a question that has been asked by a viewer exactly about the style of Mr. Modi. And the question is perhaps counter to what you were saying. And the question being, can we expect to see a more assertive Modi in his third term, from Harshit Tiwari? Harshit Tiwari being very participatory in this chat. It's very good to see those questions, Harshit. And Nilanjan, so you don't think it's going to be a more assertive Narendra Modi who's going to double down on his position and stick the course and stay in his corner and fight for his principles?
Well, he can only be more assertive, both with coalition partners and with the decisions of the government, at the risk of his government's political stability. He will have to be more accommodative to the views of other parties also, those who are part of his government. Let us not forget the fact that from 2019 to 2023, he did not hold a single meeting of the coordination committee of the coalition partners. Finally did it when the opposition parties appeared to be forming some kind of an alliance against the BJP. That is what got him worried.
But if I could jump in as well to Nilanjan's point, even if he can't be as assertive as he may have been in the past in terms of ignoring the coalition partners, I do not at all expect Mr. Modi to start taking a more humble tone. I think one of his trademarks and one of the things that got him that roaring victory in 2014 and continues, I would contest to support his popularity to this day, is his decisive leadership, the fact that he is a man of his word, a fact that the man can lead the populace. And I do want to point out the fact that the vote percentage share of the BJP remains at 37%. So many people still do, and which is the same percentage as we saw in 2019. So many people do continue to support Mr. Modi. Another thing I do not expect to see from him is more respect for the opposition. I think it's been a trademark for, and specifically the Congress, I should point out, I feel like it's been a trademark of the BJP to talk down to what they see as nepotistic politics or the politics of dynasty that we have seen in the some of the opposition parties, and they like pointing that out and criticizing that very hard. I would be very surprised if the BJP comes out and says, good job on gaining seats.
Yeah, but will that have a ready audience, given that the BJP has actually lost seats, even though it's maintained its seat share because it has gained certain seats outside its traditional support base? So. Exactly. Will that at all have any resonance amongst a voting public that has voted against them?
The resonance of being an assertive leader, you mean?
No, the idea that the opposition is nothing but dynastic politics, and will that have any resonance?
You're right.
Will there be a rethink there?
I can't imagine a complete rethink. I imagine they might be coming up with some lines about that explain why the Congress won seats without giving much credit. They might credit the Congress's gain in seats to certain fear-mongering or some such. I'm not so sure exactly how that would play out. But yes, perhaps some of the usual criticisms they will have to pull back from, since, like you said, correctly pointed out, it hasn't worked very well. But even if Mr. Modi, I feel like, is kinder to his coalition partners because he relies on them now, to the direct question about will this make him more assertive or less assertive, I do not think he will be less assertive. I do think that he will play to his strengths, and those strengths include being very assertive.
All right, let's just open this up a bit more, and let's look at the future and see what kind of the governance we can potentially look at, and what particular moves we can expect from a potential Modi government, which might be a coalition government. Nilanjan, I'd like to bring you in on that. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about changing the constitution. There has been a lot of talk about economic reforms, including land reforms. Where are we with all of that, given the results being the way they are right now? And again, these are current results, these are not final results. But assuming that they stay around about in the same fashion, what can we expect will happen moving forward when it comes to governance?
I think initially at least the basics would be covered. Reforms in India have traditionally been seen to be anti-poor. That is why there was such a pushback against the farm laws which were introduced by Mr. Modi in 2021. And for more than a year, there was the farmers' agitation, which virtually paralyzed large parts of the Indian capital. So I don't see Mr. Modi rushing into economic reforms. And also his key allies, which will become now more important, their voice will have to be articulated within the government. They are not going to permit it because their constituencies also back home would get annoyed by a very fast-paced economic reforms. There has to be a greater amount of explanation. One of the important things which has happened in the last 10 years is that the deliberative process, which was there, an integral part of the Indian legislatures in parliament, any bill which is brought used to go to a smaller select committee or standing committee, which would then get scrutinized para by various political parties, including from the opposition. That process was completely eliminated. Hardly any bills which were passed in the last 10 years went to these standing committees. So I think that a lot of democratic processes will actually be restored in the next, at least in the next 1.5 years, if they want this government to stabilize.
Okay, let's go to a very specific question that a viewer is asking, and this is to do with the economy of the country. Let's put that up on the screens for everyone. This is from Carolina Vilena. The question being, how will this election results affect the economy in India? Nimisha, do you want to take this on, or should I throw that to Nilanjan?
I mean, I'm very happy for Nilanjan to weigh in as well, but it is very interesting to watch the economic beast that India is carrying on. I've been speaking to some economists about what we've seen so far. Mr. Modi has claimed credit for the growth of the Indian economy, but there's also the view that when the government sleeps, the economy grows. So the less restrictions there are on the economy, the faster it goes along. The service sector, which is India's strength, continues to grow significantly, continues to be a strong suit. So all of those factors will go on, I think, pretty much without so much interference from the government. But I do also, picking up on what Nilanjan was talking about, anti-poor policies, it's also interesting both what the BJP as well as the Congress promise or have done when it comes to addressing the problems of India's worst off. There is a tendency of direct benefits when it comes to housing, toilets, gas cylinders, a lot of direct benefits to the poor in India. And that has, in the previous election, worked in favor of the BJP. This election around the Congress has also promised certain direct benefits. But when it comes to the base of what builds human capital, we know that India's GDP, for example, has increased. Its promises to be the third biggest in the world soon, but it's not even in the top 100 when it comes to human capital. And the two factors that really influence that, health and education, are factors that have regularly over the long term been neglected by both sides, by all parties. And unfortunately, there's no big push to change that, which is a real concern. And I'm not so sure if we can expect them to now wake up to improving health and education to improve the quality of human capital in India.
Nilanjan, today as the vote counting began in the morning India time, the stock markets weren't performing rather well. Yeah, there were crashes registered in the stock market. It was down essentially based on the results that were coming out. What does that say about the mood in the country when it comes to the economy and a potential future Modi government?
Traditionally speaking, the stock markets have also always looked at a majority government for stability. They think that they have a very poor understanding of coalition governments, unfortunately. But we have to understand that eventually, the stock markets would get stabilized in the next few days. They will know that Mr. Modi is going to be the chief minister, will be the prime minister with support of other political parties. So I think, this turbulence will continue for a couple of days and then eventually get sorted out.
You were talking about Narendra Modi being in power as the head of a coalition. I'd like to throw... sorry? Yeah, I'd like to throw a potential question that has come from our viewers. And this question is to do with the direct future of Narendra Modi. And that question being, let's entertain this possibility. Could this happen? Will Modi be voted out by the BJP and its allies and get a new leader for the top post? That question from Aman Peshawari. How do you view that possibility, Nilanjan?
I don't think so. Not with 240 odd seats of the BJP, that possibility would not happen. If the BJP had won fewer seats, than 220, then one could have possibly even debated it. But at the moment, I do not think that there's any possibility of Mr. Modi, not being voted out and somebody else being chosen in his place.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to also jump in there. Why would the NDA coalition burn its trump card? Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure that the seats that they have gotten rely very heavily on the personality cult that Mr. Modi has. But it is very interesting to be watching the headlines coming in from Indian websites. Earlier, there was one saying upset for the BJP with the UP in capital because of the Uttar Pradesh
UP is the headline, Uttar Pradesh
exactly.
is the headline.
And we have another one saying back to coalition politics, NDA survives, India revives. So a lot of fun is being had at the cost of the BJP and the NDA and Mr. Modi. But all of that being said, he will still be at the helm. I'm pretty confident.
Okay, let's expand this further and talk about India's foreign relations and what countries in the region and around the world can potentially expect. I'd like to talk about particularly Pakistan here and the relations with India's longtime neighbor, and some would argue this is a question that's come from Fareed. What is the impact of this on neighborhood relations, especially with Pakistan? Nimisha, if you'd like to take that one.
Sure. I mean, the relations with Pakistan have, if I focus on the journey with Mr. Modi, when he first came to power, he reached out. He went and he shook hands with the then Prime Minister. He went and met with him. And there was almost a moment of hope that, is there a Hindu Nationalist Party going to actually mend ties with Pakistan? And a quick history recap, not history, for the last 10 years recap is necessary here, because that ended up not being true very quickly after, because terror attacks, etc., in India actually galvanized support for the BJP when we saw the last election in 2019. And we saw Mr. Modi once again making decisive moves against Pakistan, and that actually caused a big upsurge in support. And ever since then, relations have been completely frozen. Things have barely moved when it comes to Mr. Modi's time at the helm in Pakistan, in relations with Pakistan. But looking ahead, how much does this loss of a massive mandate affect the relations with Pakistan? Would be interesting to see. I'm afraid I don't have any clear predictions, but if the opposition or if anybody else had a bit more of, if there were developments coming up, I imagine actually if there's strife with Pakistan, that works in the NDA's favor, because people generally see the BJP as a good front for against Pakistan. But when it comes to if things are peaceful, does that encourage dialogue? I'm not so sure.
Nilanjan, I know that you have to leave. Can I just get a final assessment from you on Indian foreign policy moving forward under a third Modi regime?
Well, I think it will go in the same kind of a direction. The basic issue which has to be sorted out, on which there is going to be a lot of debate in India, is over what is happening with China, with the conflict in eastern Ladakh. That is something, on which there has been a divergence of opinion between the opposition and the BJP, and Mr. Modi specifically, and with a more aggressive opposition, which will also feel that it has finally been able to pull down Mr. Modi below the majority mark. So it is going to be very aggressive. How Mr. Modi negotiates this path is something that is to be seen. Very difficult to foresee what is likely to happen. because as it is, there's been no transparency as far as that chapter is concerned. Which started sometime in the summer of 2020.
Right. We'll leave it there for the moment. Nilanjan, I know you have to leave, but thanks so much for joining us today. Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, political analyst, and
I wish I could have been with you for some more time, but I really have to rush and get hooked on to another channel.
No, I understand.
Hectic.
I understand. Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Nilanjan. Take care. Have a good evening.
We know how that goes, Virish. The incessant line of guests on Indian national TV.
And double booking as well sometimes.
And double bookings and hours of analysis. But then somehow audiences in India always show up. We've seen the questions coming in here as well. But the fact that the politics grips the country in a way that is actually once again quite fun to watch.
We were talking about election watch parties, right? I mean, it's literally a watch party. You basically have a giant screen there.
Exactly.
In clubs as well sometimes, and you're just watching and analysing yourself.
Did you hear about movie theatres in India?
There are movie theatres
allowing
now.
The PVRs in India
that.
are actually inviting people to watch election results. So there would be cinema halls with people with popcorn watching the results roll in. Now, of course, how sour that popcorn turns depending on which party you support will be something for the people.
Or if they want to have caramel popcorn, as they have in Germany. Just staying on the issue of foreign policy, let's just turn the argument on its head and assume that the BJP-led NDA doesn't come to power. And what if it is, in the final results, clear that maybe the India alliance comes to power? And this is where I think there is a question that has come from a viewer, which is very interesting, from Niranjan Banda, asking what happens to Indian international affairs and external affairs if India wins the election? That's a very interesting question, I find.
I mean, yeah, it's quite fascinating because when you look at, if we try to recap based on what was happening the last time around when the Congress was at the helm of a government, they were maintaining strong ties with the US. There is no, I mean, to put it shortly, there's no need to blow up bridges. There's no need to upset the direction of positive foreign relations with other countries. But I guess when it comes to what the India coalition wants to focus on, wants to emphasize, they have repeatedly through this campaign said democracy is at risk, the constitution is at risk, the idea of India is at risk. And if they were to drive home that point, they would, in a sense, be appealing to international partners as well to see them as a support, as a revival of democracy, as people who will stand by certain values, as people who will come into talks a bit more kindly in some ways. Perhaps actually might not be as assertive as the NDA was. So that would be quite something to watch. But again, once again, as we're talking about the coalitions, the difference between the Congress and the BJP coalition is that the BJP has 240 seats. The Congress, as of now, trends. The Congress would have about 100. That means it's relying on 2/3 to its coalition for. So again, unified policies.
The Congress needs the coalitions more than the
Yes.
BJP needs. The BJP needs them as well, but it has a better shot at getting those
So
coalitions.
how unified that foreign policy would be, and how much time there would be for it while you're settling squabbles within for domestic policies, I don't know. It might suffer, actually.
I think there's a number of questions that we would like to discuss. I mean, we have about a minute. Can we get a prognostication from you? Do you think that the opposition alliance will be able to capitalize on whatever results are coming out now? Very quickly.
I think they would definitely be making statements about how this upholds the idea of India and that this is a vote for democracy. They will definitely say that in this moment, but how far they can capitalize in pushing back against the BJP and its policies, that I think would be completely up to them. I'm not very confident about how well they'll do.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Nimisha Jaiswal, thanks so much for coming into the studio for that. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Ask TW. To our viewers and the community on YouTube, thank you very much for sending us your questions and comments. We have enjoyed it. There'll, of course, be more news and analysis on the India elections in about 15 minutes from now and through the day as the election results keep coming in. Remember, these are just current trends. These are not final results as yet. We're still waiting on a degree of finality, but this is the trend that we have at the moment. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Biresh Banerjee. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.